Well, good evening. I don't know if you can hear me because I don't do this very often. I hope somebody will shout on the comments if you can't hear me. I've unmuted my microphone, so that's a good start, I suppose. I don't even know if the comments are going to work. If you do want to message me, you could try LinkedIn, or if your comments are working. If somebody did want to message now, so I can just see if the comments are working on here, because I'm using a thing called StreamYard that I don't normally use. Okay, I just want to talk a little bit about why we're all here. So the rap, like many of you, I'm sure I was, you were slightly cross that the rosy picture that has been given to, you can hear, hello, Matthew, great. Michelle, you can hear, oh, good. That's given me a bit of confidence now. I'll stop baffling on. Hey, look, so during the budget, Mr. Hunt got up and started telling everybody what a wonderful rosy picture it is in British media. And yet 50% of us working in the non-scripted area are struggling to find work. 75% of us say we're under financial stress. And indeed, many of us, having not received a penny of help during COVID, are not very resilient to having very little work. And so, of course, Beck2 have done a survey and found that people are leaving the industry. There have been news articles about people leaving the industry. And it got me to thinking, because I don't know what I can do about it. And I thought perhaps the only thing I can do is help us all find a voice. And that voice might help, if you like, counter the notion that everything is rosy in the television industry, when clearly we can all see very firsthand, up close and personal, that it isn't. So that's what the rap was all about. And in my kind of cheesy entertainment way, I said the rap, because we're all going to wrap our arms around each other. But also, I was kind of pointing out, is it really a rap on the British television industry as we know it? And yet all these facilities are being built all over the place. A new one seems to open every week, or there's an expansion planned, and everything seems to go against what we all know, that there isn't a lot of work around. Is the work going to people that are coming in from offshore? Is the work for people who work in scripted? What are the reasons for the fact there's no work? Because, you know, people sometimes say, oh, it's because look at what they're commissioning. I mean, it's the creatives that say that, you know, Gladiators, Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy are all kind of brought in. That would be a good reason for the creative people, the people that come up with ideas for new shows, to be worried. I think also it's a notion that the government should be slightly worried. Our industry, the format industry, has contributed something like between 2.8 and 4 billion to GDP over the last 5 or 6 years. That's year on year, not altogether. And so the creative part of the industry is an important part of the industry. So when you hear that new projects are being pulled and canned, and that people are going back to things like Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, Gladiators, all the kind of tried and tested, you kind of think, well, where are these new ideas coming from? Where's that format industry of tomorrow coming from? And I think, you know, that's an interesting question, because clearly it doesn't matter if, you know, if you're a sound person, that's where I started. If you're a sound person, you can work on Jeopardy, you can work on Wheel of Fortune. So, but there seems to be a genuine downturn in the business, and that's a worry. Now, I'm Jonathan Glazer. I'm a showrunner, as they call them nowadays, an executive producer. I used to be the head of international formats and light entertainment production at the BBC, or as the BBC would call me, the editor of light entertainment. Um, and now I work internationally. I'm very fortunate in that I work all over the world. However, it all sounds very glamorous. Let me assure you, it's another square box with some lights hanging from the ceiling. But the thing I wanted to share, and my very good friend Tim Crescenti might be on this call as well. I can't see a list of everybody who is on the video, but Tim works internationally as well, and there's a couple of other people that work internationally on the call as well. And it's an international problem. I've got friends of mine. I often work in Singapore or the Middle East or Southeast Asia and the Middle East, and people there are experiencing as much of a downturn or a downturn of varying degrees as the rest of us. So it is a depressing outlook. And is it terminal? Should we all be looking for retraining? And should we all be looking for how our skills are transferable? Is it going to pick up? There was an interesting article from Dr. Alex Connick today, which I'll just share with you, which is worth looking at and might give people a little bit more confidence. Here we go. Let me just try and make that a bit bigger. You might not be able to see it terribly well, but anyway, it's about the Oscars and the fact that the Oscars got the best audience for some 4 years on ABC, and it was a very tight, very good production. One has to be said, directed by an Englishman, or is Hamish Scottish? I never know. I don't know him personally, but it was a very tight production, and it was a great production, and it was highly entertaining. But there's an idea that live television is coming back. Is that going to be our saving grace? Live events, appointments to view, things that if you miss, you really do miss out because you've learned who won, who lost on social media before you have a chance to watch it. So if you're a film lover like me, you stayed up all night and watched the Oscars just so that you wouldn't hear the results on social media. So is that something where we can all look for work? The live events that we have with Dancing on Ice, Dancing with the Stars, or Strictly Come Dancing, as it's called here, is that somewhere that we can look for some degree of comfort that there's going to be an explosion in live television? Who do we blame for all of this? Do we blame the streamers who are repurposing material and dubbing stuff from South Korea into English? And so there's less, there are less shows being watched by more people around the world. I haven't got the answers to that. And I haven't got the answers to what we're meant to do about it. But I wanted to start The Voice, so that the rap, so that we could at least in some way, shape or form, find some kind of voice, some way of balancing out this rosy picture that people like Mr. Hunt were portraying during the budget. It's interesting that this is one of our local MP. I'm in South Cambridge, and this is the MP for South East Cambridge, who also happens to be the Minister for our industry. And I was thinking, they seem to be very quiet. I don't know if Hannah, who's the Bectu rep for unscripted television, has much to do with Lucy or has much contact with Lucy. She's a KC. I think our industry is very poorly served by the people in government who are meant to be the voice of our industry. I don't think they understand it. I think most of them, like most of our politicians nowadays, are flashes in the pan. They kind of come along for a wee short while, just like our prime ministers. And how can they know about our industry? I've been in our industry for 40 years, and I still learn new things about it every day. Lucy has never been part of her industry. She's obviously a very bright woman. She's a KC, and she's an MP, and I'm sure she's a very able person. But is she a voice for our industry? Is it worth contacting her? Is it all going to end for her very shortly? And are we going to be dealing with Miss Debonair? Let me share her, who's the shadow Minister for Sport. Will she still be in post? Does she know anything more about our industry than the people who are in post at the moment? I don't know. I don't know her. I don't know Miss Fraser either. But my point is that we need a voice. We need someone to say, hey, look, our industry is very important to this country. It's certainly very important to all the people who are listening to me rabbit on at the moment. And it's something that we need to do something. We need to do something. And as I say, I felt a bit paralyzed because I didn't know what on earth it was I could potentially do other than provide a voice. Now, I would say one thing. This is all a bit of an experiment, and I'm not sure that this is the best medium for doing this, and that I'm planning on doing it every single Wednesday until people stop arriving and stop attending. I was very pleased to see that we had quite a few attendees this time round. But I would like to do it every Wednesday so that we can exchange ideas and provide a forum. And maybe it would be better on a Zoom call. I know that I can hook up Zoom to LinkedIn now, and that might be a better way of doing this so people can contribute. And it's not you guys just listening to me. And incidentally, if anybody wants to join in the conversation on video, you can either use the chat, which I can see some of you are at the moment, or if you say, hey, I've got something interesting to contribute, then maybe I can send you a link and invite you and you can join in with a video. But I'd much prefer to have all of you on video so we could have a show of hands and people could put their hands up and say, I've got something to say, rather than me having to read it out from here. Lucy has just written, Hannah has just written that she doesn't personally have anything to do with Lucy, but the head of Back2 may do. It's clear that MPs are disconnected, and especially from unscripted. I bet half of them are watching Maths Australia. If anybody else is watching that, I am in particular because I really like it, and I happen to know one of the experts from Australia. But Married at First Sight is a great format. And sorry, I've got sidetracked. But let me just go on to my little presentation here of some of the things. How many people here feel that they're struggling? And do use the chat. I won't put it up if you don't want me to. I'll ask beforehand. But how many people here are actually out of work? How many people are struggling to find work? Hannah loves maths. Well, that's good. We all love maths. Are other people really finding it difficult? I know I have one or two extremely good exec producers who have found it very difficult over the last 6 months. But I sort of wanted to get an idea of what the actual situation was, whether, you know, this is something that we have to do something about. Michelle Woods is saying, yes, it's difficult, and she's also trying to help others. Kate Staples saying, yes, it's difficult. Rob Watts saying, yes, it's difficult. You know, I've got a very good friend of mine who's a question writer who's finding it difficult. Joe Haddock, been out of work since the beginning of the year. Helen Williamson, yes. I mean, look, I think we know ourselves, don't we? Nazneen Moment saying yes. An anonymous LinkedIn user saying yes. Brilliant. Look, it's difficult. It's tough. And so I do think our overall notion of what's going on does reflect the situation on the ground. And I think that people in positions of power with a voice, like Lucy, like potentially Thangnam Debnet, needs to know. I find it difficult. I work abroad. I've just been doing a format out in Singapore, but that's finished. And I know that my director now hasn't got any work. She was freelance. Hannah's saying it's very difficult. Hannah, I'm going to put this post up so that other people can read it. Hannah is the, oh, that's a nice little BAFTA you've got there, Hannah. Hannah is the representative for Back2, and she for non-scripted television. Jobs are being posted, but often are not fulfilled. There wasn't a job to begin. I think that some jobs are advertised for 3 days and then taken down. I mean, one assumes that every job is being so hard chased that they don't have to keep them up for very long because they get them filled very, very quickly. Who knows? I just know that the situation is dire, and I know that we need to communicate that to people that can do something about it. And I think our industry is almost too big to fail. Liz Robinson, my husband, is in exec, and hearing from a lot of their friends that it's very difficult and quite a few are out of work. And I think it's across the board. I don't just think it's the execs. I think it's sound, cameras, all sorts of people who specialize in reality or non-scripted are finding it really, really difficult at the moment. And I think you look at ITV, ITV posted reasonable results, but if you actually look at the split of the results, the actual area where it was showing very poor results was television, and particularly non-scripted television. And I think that is our worry. And the government that we have at the moment have got a long history of thinking that market forces affect everything, and that if there isn't enough work, it's because the market doesn't want to create the kind of material that we all produce, and therefore it has to just be left to natural market forces, and the non-scripted area will die. Is it permanent? Does anybody think that the non-scripted or the dearth of non-scripted reality television commissions is permanent? Okay, this is interesting as well. Liz, we'll definitely get onto that about non-transferable skills. We'll talk about that in a little while. Anybody got anything else to say about their personal experiences? Has anybody been booked for something and then had it taken away at the last moment? Michelle is saying that it feels like it won't ever pick up at the same level that we've all enjoyed previously, which is a very depressing thought. And I think it happened in television an awful lot before, in that there were an awful lot of high-end productions. So big budget shows, the live shows, the kind of talent shows, Saturday night shows were all going gangbusters, and that was all great. And the kind of the lower daytime shows, the ones that you could almost guarantee would get between 1.6 and 2 million, certainly the strip quiz shows, some of the daytime stuff, shows like This Morning, obviously, which is fairly staple at the moment. I think it's the stuff in the middle. It is like the UK version of Maths. It's that mid-range stuff that we're losing, and we are losing the talent to even make those shows because people just can't sustain an industry. I know that Directors UK, of which I'm a member, discusses this a lot, and how it's very hard to sustain a job as a career as a director now, because you get booked for so few days, and they're so few and far between, that you almost need a kind of two-job attitude where you've got something else you can do to fill in the gaps. Rob Watts, a friend, has had 2 jobs that got taken away last minute. Michelle Reynolds is saying we're going to lose so many experienced and talented freelancers who realize that TV is incompatible with adult life. I think that's also true. I think, for people, it might all seem fun and a bit precarious when you're straight out of university or straight out of school. But I think it's difficult once you start settling down and you have a family that you need to look after, and other responsibilities. Hannah, again, our Back2 rep, is saying she thinks that unscripted is going to become a hybrid. Let me show this. It's going to become a hybrid with online content and branded content. Commissioners are either looking for reality TV right now on short form docs due to lower budgets. And I think that's very true. The show that I just did in Singapore was across the whole of Southeast Asia, and it was fully funded. We had about 12 sponsors. It was a nightmare to produce because of that. But it's called The Big Spark, and it goes out on CNA. You can actually see it online here as well. But it was fully funded through sponsorship, and I think that's one way forward. I also think we have to look at how television is going to change once there's the kind of broadcast switch off, which is going to happen over the next couple of years. Once there's no point in using broadcast anymore because everybody's either watching live streams or streaming, via their computer, there's going to be no need for television, and it's just going. And I don't think that's a worry necessarily. I just think it's different platforms. But the trouble that everybody's having is what forms of monetization will sustain the industry moving forwards, and I think that is the worry and the thing that we all need to think about. Okay, somebody said here, Michelle has said. So this is Michelle Woods. Quite a few of us telly-mums run a group called TV Switch Up, which is for people to look at alternative careers. And we have 1,300 vetted members so far. So much talent having to look elsewhere. Yeah, that is truly shocking, Michelle, I have to say. Then another Michelle Reynolds. Let me share that. Our best chance for a voice is for everyone to join back to. The unscripted branch, UTVU, especially need numbers so they can put pressures on broadcasters and streamers. I think that might be true as well. Michelle, you've got a fan here, a LinkedIn user who's anonymous, saying TV Switch Up is an excellent group. Well, that's good. And it's these sorts of things that I want the Wrap to share about where do we best find our voice. And I know that TV mums or telly mums isn't necessarily just for mums, or obviously though that's its focus, because I think I'm a member of TV mums as well. But I think, yes, joining back to is one way forward so that we do have a voice. I think even forums like this, if they grow and are vibrant, can have a voice as well. I think, if you like, not blowing my own trumpet, but sort of people who understand the industry can become good advisors to our culture secretaries, so they get a proper. Michelle Woods is saying TV Switch Up is definitely not just for mums. Well, that's good as well. And I think it's really important that we do find a voice. And I suppose people like myself, who are dinosaurs of the industry, I'm proud to say, or even people, there's people in Directors UK, the wonderful Jeff Posner is another person that's very concerned about all of this. And I know Jeff is keen for the voice of TV directors to be heard, as are the rest of the people in the multi-camera TV directors group. So, there are lots of places, and it's just a question of bringing it together and focusing and saying to whoever happens to be in government, you are going to lose such an important part of our cultural background in television, an important talent pool, and such an important contributor to GDP, that something does need to be done to support people in the industry, and that tax breaks for films up to 15 million bucks are not just the only place that needs some sort of financial assistance. That everybody needs some kind of financial assistance, and I think it's up to us to come up with creative ways of doing that, and what sort of assistance we want. I don't think the government's going to give jolly freelancers a handout, and I'm still very bitter that we didn't get any help at all during COVID, because I know a lot of people, myself included, who really were suffering. And this is something interesting as well, because I know lots of people talk about it. Lorraine, sorry, I've put your post up as well. I'm not sure anyone cares about the talent pool, to be honest, because there's so many youngers who are cheaper coming up. And there's a couple of things about this. I also teach at the University for the Creative Arts, who are also suffering, like all of education, because of the issues around foreign students and the fact that there just aren't the foreign students to support the courses anymore. But that's another discussion altogether. But for me, it's really difficult to talk to a group of students when I know that the jobs that they want to apply for are becoming few and far between. I do, for the first time in my life, I've never had any sort of jitters about training people up, because I do believe that talent does shine through and that experience does shine through. But I would agree, the experience is leaving the industry in droves, and I think it is a worry. And I think that's why we also have to engage production companies, certainly the big ones like Fremantle, certainly the large ones like All3Media. And, you know, you're always seeing, and there's plenty at the moment, I see a lot of them because of what I do at the university, but, you know, schemes for runners, schemes for apprentices, all of that kind of stuff. And I think that's really important. But are we just simply training up too many people for an industry that can't support that number of jobs? Are we adding to the problem that established people have of new young talent pricing everybody else out of the market because we're not unionized? And clearly somebody straight out of uni can probably do a day for a lot less money than they'd have to pay me or, you know, 90% of the people who are listening to what I'm saying now. This is Michelle again saying, if the broadcasters are not acknowledging the struggle for freelancers in their industry, how will the government understand? And I think that's a perfectly valid point, Michelle. I don't know how we make people understand how important the freelance market is, and that it'll be one of those things that people will only notice when it's gone. And I think that's desperately sad. Cara has said this, I apologize if I pronounce any, but I do struggle with this a little bit, as being so heavily text-based, because some of you may know I'm pretty dyslexic. So Cara, it'd be great to have an industry standard website where people can apply for roles rather than just recommendations. And so many websites on Facebook and groups to apply for stuff. Not sure if anybody else feels the same. I think that's interesting. And Hannah is replying to you by saying, should Bectu regulate the jobs market? Do you know what? I think that's a very difficult question, and it's something that we can talk about. But I think it's something we should talk about and have as a debate item once I go to, which I'm probably going to do, go to Zoom so that we can all talk a little bit better, but and a little bit more interactively. I don't know whether I'm a fan of Bectu sort of controlling the jobs market. I think there are some very good websites out there, but it does, when times are hard, it does feel like there's an awful lot of jobs posted, cross-posted to all the sites. There are clearly too many people applying for the jobs, and that again creates a kind of market economy where often jobs don't go to the necessarily the most talented people, but it goes to people who are the less expensive people. And I know Bectu would be keen to regulate that as well. And I know that's you know, a bone of contention within the industry. But again, it comes down to the whole economics. Maybe the next government, fingers crossed, will have something to change about all of this. I know Philippa from Bectu talked about a website for jobs at a recent roundtable we did for broadcast. Yes, I've read all of that. Feels like somebody needs to do it, but not sure who. And, you know, I think that's a good point. Is that something we should be looking for? Liz Robinson is saying that she thinks Talent Manager is one of the best jobs platforms. You know, that's a possibility. I don't know. I don't honestly know what the answer is to that. I just know that, you know, it's a desperate situation, and I think part and parcel of it is looking at potentially some of us getting around, not just online face to face, but literally face to face, and saying, what can we do about this? What can we really do about it? Because yes, indeed, Michelle, wouldn't the Bectu site just be replicating the Talent Manager? I mean, my own personal feeling is that Bectu would do much better trying to regulate and standardize the wages. I know that the Directors UK has been trying to create and negotiate with all the broadcasters and all the production companies standard rates for directors, because clearly there's a huge diversity in those kind of pay scales, and also protecting the people who are there doing multi-camera and reality directing. And then, of course, there's this huge other notion of the wide scope of the jobs that we do. One of the first things I do on the very first day of the new year at University of the Creative Arts is try and explain to people what jobs there are in television. You know, it isn't just obviously cameras, sound, It's amazing how many new entrants don't know what vision mixers do. People tend to know what editing is and a little bit about the post-production and a little bit about audio, but there's all the other management jobs as well that are also under pressure. You know, production managers, line managers, even, you know, they don't always get the best press, but I, as an exec producer, work very closely with the accountants and the bookkeepers on the industry side to keep my budgets in check. So, and Hannah is saying that our industry isn't regulated, and that's the issue. We could have an arm of Ofcom regulating it, but they couldn't account for streamers or online content. Well, there's another whole issue there about whether Ofcom should regulate streamers and online content, which of course I think most of us believe they should. Do we have any more information on how the climate is now and if it's likely to improve this year at all? There seem to be some more jobs out there now, but not a lot. Lorraine, I don't think that, given those figures from ITV and given what's happening at Channel 4, that there is a rosy picture to be painted at all. And I think it comes down to this whole notion of advertisers have left the broadcast medium. The streamers rely on subscription base, although even the streamers are losing some of their subscriptions and having to include adverts now. You have to, if you want to remove the adverts from ITVX and the commercial players, you have to pay a subscription. But that doesn't necessarily go to paying for more content. As I say, we're getting more content watched by less people, and you only have to look at Netflix to kind of see how all of that works. And it happened a little bit in the kind of television industry a few years ago, where not all the middle ground productions disappeared, and as I say, we got a lot of cheap daytime stream quiz shows and a lot of high-end stuff. Yes, ad revenue is down 14%, and there's going to be no commissioning this year. I think there will be a little bit of commissioning, but commissioners now are able to plan. You know, one of the reasons I work abroad a lot is because we came up with the idea for the Big Spark in August of last year, and we were making the show in September, October, and November. That isn't going to ever happen in this country anymore, and it's going to happen in Southeast Asia even less. So people have planned ahead. They're having to spend their money much more wisely and frugally, which is why they're planning ahead. So the opportunities for new shows are very, very limited. I think you will often get the breakout hit like Traitors and those sorts of shows. And I think we're going to see a lot more collaboration between the UK and the US, just like Traitors was kind of like a hub production in the castle in Scotland. We're looking at doing hub productions around the world for a couple of other projects that I've got on the go at the moment. But the only way I can sustain my business is to work internationally. If I was just making shows in the UK, I wouldn't be able to sustain it. Adrian, I've heard from someone in the company. Yes, I hope I can share that. I don't think you've said anything on towards that. Adrian has said, I've heard from someone quite high up in the company that it's involved with marketing international versions and they know exactly what's being lined up. Sadly, she said it won't start picking up till autumn. The one thing I would say as a champion of the BBC is let's stop all the discussion about replacing the license fee, because at least the BBC is guaranteed its 3.5 billion from the license fee and can, although prices for production are going up, can continue commissioning and isn't affected by the advertising turndown. So at least in this country, we have a nationally competitive channel that isn't subject to advertising revenue fluctuations. What it is slightly subject to is fluctuations in the viewing habits of people. And so therefore the pressure for the BBC to lose its license fee, which I can quite understand for all those people that don't watch the BBC, of which the reality is there are not that many, but I can understand people like that not wanting to pay their license fee. But at least the BBC, as I say, is slightly protected from that. And one hopes that's why it's a disappointment. And I say this as the original director of Gladiators from series 3 of the original, that something like Gladiators comes along and that we can't come up with a new Gladiators. We don't have to pay a license fee, and that license fee can go to fueling the television market in other countries and create a license income for the BBC. And yes, Michelle is saying, agree, read the BBC. The challenge with them is they currently can't afford the tariffs, and so asking indies to find co-funding, which is obviously happening across the channels and more. Like Traitors, it was, a lot of the costs were amortized by being a co-production with America. And again, there are lots of other cases where the BBC are having to look at creative ways of making their 3.5 guaranteed income go when you're fighting inflation just like the rest of us. So it's not a very good picture at all, which I suppose should bring us on to, we've had a look at innovative strategies. Alternative employment. I've always maintained that in our industry, we, particularly at a production level, I'm talking about producers, directors, researchers, have a vast array of transferable skills. And it's about getting industry to recognize that. Many people, myself included, didn't go to university or left university to join the entertainment industry. It's like running away to the circus when I did it. But anyway, I don't have a degree in my back pocket. I don't know what other industries would look at media degrees. I feel very sorry for people who have got technical qualifications, editors, sound people, and those kind of things. But I ask you to think about this. There's also a very good book which I always champion called Who Moved My Cheese, which is about industries going through change, and it's about how you adapt to change. It's only about 78 pages long, take you about 2 hours to read it. It took me about 3 days, but I am dyslexic. But Who Moved My Cheese is a very interesting little book, because if we all just sit here waiting for the industry to pick up, if we all just sit here like little mice waiting for our cheese to be delivered to where it was always delivered, we're all going to suffer. So we have to get on our motorbikes with our ears, mouse ears, and our tails flapping in the wind and find new opportunities. Now, are they new opportunities in helping content creators make their content? Is it helping? Is it in the streaming? Is it in the live context? Do we need to do live training within the some training within the industry so that we've got a wider skill base? I know up in Salford, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, but certainly the university courses I'm involved with and the training I'm involved with is much more 360. When I trained as a sound person, that's what I was going to be, a sound person. When the camera people came in, you made a choice. Were you going to be a camera person? Were you going to be a sound person? Were you going to be in lighting? So were you going to be a spark? Nowadays, I know people are trained much more in the round so that you can do that awful thing, reducing us all but to numbers, and utilize your resources. So if you own a big company, and they do this in Singapore a lot, where you have a group of people that are television production people, and they can almost do any job that they're given. So this is just something from Hannah. Some commissioners may want pitches with funding attached. However, personally speaking, I would be concerned about impartiality, especially in unscripted. It could end up like GB News with a broadcast attached. Yes, look, I do have a lot of experience of this working where I often work in Southeast Asia, and it's not quite as bad as you would have it, in that I think everybody in the advertising industry recognizes that the worst kind of sponsorship is where you have Subaru sponsoring a rallying show or a reality show of celebrities driving through Borneo or wherever it happens to be. That is a recipe for disaster. The Big Spark was fully funded. It actually made a profit on the funding. It was sponsored by everybody from a bank to some venture capitalists, to all sorts and every sorts of sponsorship you can think of. And the way we did it is we editorially rolled the sponsorship into the program. So we had experts from the bank giving us advice, and it wasn't, buy our product. It was, this is what we look for when we're talking to an entrepreneur. It was a business format. So I think there are areas where we can adapt. My favorite piece of sponsorship in British near history was when Richard and Judy did the book club, and it was sponsored by Specsavers. Now, Specsavers are not going to influence what books Richard and Judy recommend, nor should they. If WH Smith's had sponsored it, or the Times had sponsored it, one would slightly more question the books that Richard and Judy were recommending. But if it's Specsavers who are sponsoring it, I think we can all rest assured that Specsavers are just glad that people need spectacles to read. So I think that's a very good way of looking at it, and it's for the production company owners and for the creatives to come up with interesting ways that even from the development stage can think of ways of and what can be integrated into the program to pay for it. I know that all of our pitches in Southeast Asia nowadays are completely integrated with sponsorship, and it's sponsorship that we, the creators, don't think will impinge our editorial judgment when it comes to making the show. Yes, we might have to give over 30 seconds of screen time to an Air India plane flying into an airport because they're the people that paid for all the tickets. But when it actually comes to the actual content, as I say, if you get a bank to recommend or to give advice to people about how to fund their startup, it still puts the expertise of the bank on show, but it isn't like, get our credit card and we'll give you a 10% discount. David Bodycombe has come up with a thought here. Oh, let me just try and share that. Do you think TV production is going to look overstaffed when YouTube teams of 1 to 5 people can achieve things that are not quality but good enough quality? David, I think this is really interesting, and again, speaking with my hat of being an exec producer working in Asia quite a lot, when we do Asia's Got Talent, it actually has a crew of 215 people, which is on a par with an international show. However, the crews that make shows for MediaCorp are very much reduced, and it's very much a kind of slight job share activity. It means that you have to work really pretty hard. It means that, for instance, on this particular show, we didn't have a casting team. The story team did the casting themselves. It meant they got slightly longer contracts, but it meant that we employed less people. So I think, yes, good enough quality is something that's really an interesting debate that technically we all need to have. It's clear that the streamers, even on their reality end of things, are looking for a cinematographic look. They're looking for, deep focus. They're looking for cinema reality type shoots. They're not necessarily looking for the kind of reduced quality that you see on YouTube, like when the Sidemen do one of their trips abroad and it's all shot handheld by them themselves and then edited together afterwards with their fingers crossed. I think we might be seeing a little bit of that coming through. I think we do have to, and we will have to look at our staffing levels, but I think, it's part of the ginormous reset that television is going through. Matt's got something to say about that. Matt Freestone's the director. I sent plenty of content on YouTube that is certainly more than good enough for broadcast. Maybe it was C that you meant to say there, Matt. I apologize if it wasn't, but anyway, yes, look, and I think it's one of the kind of big scams of the last 10 years. YouTube, everybody, when it started, everybody going, oh my God, YouTube's going to be the death knell of quality in British television. Nowadays, more and more, or television, broadcast television, nowadays, more and more YouTube tries to emulate what we do in broadcast. More and more YouTube content is shot on FS9s. It's shot with deep focus long lens stuff. It's shot beautifully. You've only got to look at, you know, the use of lighting for all the makeup and the influencer videos now. And if you're Pantene or Lancome or whoever else it happens to be, you don't want your beautifully expensive makeup to look shonky because it's shot without decent lighting. So influencers are doing lighting courses. They're all over Facebook, they're all over LinkedIn. They're all buying ring lights like there was no tomorrow. I can't use them because of my glasses, but there we go. So yes, you know, the quality, YouTube is now trying to match the quality of us. The other interesting thing about that, this is just a broad aside while I collect my thoughts about some other things, but I use jump cuts on YouTube now to on my interviews. We have trained the audience so well in cutting out gaps and pauses and breaths that I just snip them out, and I don't cut away to somebody's hands twiddling, or I don't take a shot of them walking down the outside of the building in which I'm interviewing them to use as a cutaway when I do have to cut out a pause. I just cut it. And the other thing we make a huge use of is the periscope camera technique, so that instead of the interviewee looking off to a producer, the producer's image is like on a porta-prompt device in the lens, so that, like all YouTube videos now where people actually talk into the lens, I want my interviews to talk in the first person and say, I do this, I do that, and we don't have an interviewer at all. So there's a lot of cross-fertilization between online media and broadcast, and we're each borrowing from each other. But I don't think television is going to go down the toilet in terms of production values, but I do think the numbers are going to have to change. Hannah has said David Buddicombe's self-shoot content is championed on social platforms in the algorithm, so production quality isn't necessarily seen as a priority. Unfortunately, it isn't, Hannah. I agree, but I think anybody who was in on YouTube at the beginning and now looks at YouTube, you'll see that the production values, excuse me, have gone up, and that's why I'm saying, you know, I see quite a few adverts for influencers, well-paid influencers who are making a lot of money, needing help. They need editors, they need people who can shoot the stuff. They really just want to perform it, and they want to be the performer. They don't want to sit there having to edit it. And with the volume of stuff that they post, they need help. So there's a way in which people can hopefully find gainful employment there. And maybe that's something to think about as we move forward. So this is, you know, a very sad indictment on the whole thing. Adrian, I'll be on a building site next week. I am an offline editor. And, you know, honestly, mate, you've got my deepest sympathies. I know that, and I can see it in my children as well, you know, we all sat down with these dreams of working in telly. My story is quite simple. My dad was an art director. He worked on some great films at Elstree. He died before I was born, but I went to the Elstree Children's Christmas party, walked into the studio, saw all the lights, saw some of the sets, and thought, this is what I want to do. And so since I was 6 years old, it was my dream to be in television. I feel very fortunate that I didn't have that dream 5 years ago, because to look at that dream not coming true now because of a downturn in advertising would be absolutely crushing. So to anybody who's listening to this, who has had their dreams of a career dashed, or is finding that career just isn't paying the bills, you know, I think not only should we be sharing our places where we can get jobs, but we need to be sharing our support and where people can get financial help, and where people can get help, obviously, with their mental health, because I think, you know, that is a very serious problem and something that we really need to think about. I'm a big champion of mental health. I'm a governor, or a director as we're called now, at a local school, and that's my area of responsibility. So I do feel very sorry for people who are having to write things like, I will be on a building site next week. And absolutely, there is no shame in a stopgap. There is absolutely no shame. You know, uh, this time last year, I hadn't recovered from COVID. I hadn't recovered from the financial issues that COVID had put on me. I applied to take my heavy duty vehicle, my heavy goods vehicle license, because I thought driving a truck round seems eminently more productive and pays better than sitting here doing nothing. Michelle is saying here, and this is another place that we should look for, the film and TV charity are brilliant, both for financial advice and a grant. And yes, I would concur with that. They're great. So anybody who is struggling, please look them up. I'm going to put together a little sheet after we've finished this, not today or tomorrow, but of kind of useful addresses. Garden centre. I quite fancy a job in a garden centre. And how many times have we all had a dream of that tea shop? Anyway, I'm not making light of it at all, but there are other jobs out there. I think the trouble that we all have is that many of us dreamt long and hard about an industry that we really wanted to be a part of, and we're watching that industry disappear in front of our very eyes. And I think that does very much play into the, and why it is such a serious mental health issue for, creative people. And, are there other jobs that as a creative you can go into, website design, or, I sometimes wonder what happened to the explosion of video that was meant to happen in marketing. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of the quality diminish. Those wonderful adverts that had 3 helicopters and 2 jeeps going across the desert in Abu Dhabi are fewer and far between now. Most of them are CAD generated. The cars aren't real. They're all come from the inside of a computer. The helicopters have turned into a 450 quid drone from our friends DJI. Things are changing. And that's why reading that book, Who Moved My Cheese, is so important, because we just at some point have to acknowledge that the cheese has moved and we've got to go chase after it. Michelle Reynolds, the work I've done with Share My Telejob and now Real Time Media, we've done a lot of research into the history of job sharing as a way of retaining the workforce in times of economic downturn. We've placed 60 job share pairs in HETV drama over the last couple of years, and also in unscripted. And it's a brilliant tool for people in work, literally doubling the amount of people who can stay in the industry. It's only the practical solution I've heard anywhere for this situation. Don't disagree with that. I also don't disagree with the sentiment of the guy who won the, what was it, best adapted screenplay, Cole, I can't remember his name, perhaps somebody can, but he said, hey guys, look, instead of making one film for $200 million, why don't you make 10 films for $20 million or 200 films for $1 million? And I think that is another thing that's happening in our industry. And the streamers, I lay the blame at the streamers' feet for that particular issue. We have these wonderful high-end dramas like The Crown, some of the things that you see on Netflix and Amazon Prime, to a certain extent, Apple TV, cost an absolute fortune. But certainly on things like Apple TV, you get 4 new dramas released every quarter, if that. If you could quadruple that and just not spend as much money, would people notice the quality if the storytelling was good? Would more people be in work? Maybe. It's just that it's such a risk adverse environment at the moment. Everybody's pouring millions into trying to make a success of one big thing rather than taking a risk of a couple of little things. And in one way, and I'm not going to sit here and disparage Jeremy Hunt completely, because I think the idea of putting the 40% cap, or the 15 million cap on the 40% tax break, is really useful. I would have liked to have seen it a little bit lower. A British indie film costs between 2 and 4 million to make. So give those films and make lots of them, and more people will be in work in film. The same could happen in TV, but we're pouring all of our money into Ant and Dec, into Strictly, into Dancing on Ice, that there are no, and then the kind of the strip game shows, 5 a week, record 5 a day, 6 a day, whatever it happens to be, knock them out as cheaply as you possibly can, pointless, is another one. You know, we need more reasonable budget programs because we just need more volume, and I think that would go a long way to helping the situation, and indeed preserving the creativity and feeding into this whole creative environment that Britain and England and Northern Ireland and the south of Ireland always punches above its weight creatively, and created this industry of formats along with the States. And you know, you look at the British formats that are exported around the world, that's going to dry up because they're just not being commissioned. You know, it's going to rely on the co-productions of things like the Traitors and those sorts of things. So smaller shows and more of them would go some way to alleviating this problem and maintaining the creativity of the people that are coming up with shows. Okay, we've had a look at identifying which online communities or groups have been invaluable during this time. Talent Manager, the charity, the film and television charity. I think, you know, BAFTA needs a stronger voice. I think Directors UK needs a stronger voice. I think broadcast has done a reasonable job over the last couple of months, but I think broadcast also needs to highlight the real dire issues that we're going through, and broadcast, as well as hosting their terribly snazzy and C21, their terribly snazzy and expensive screenings and all of those kind of things. You know, let's look at giving back and having online discussions or conference meetups that don't cost an arm and a leg, that we can all go to and discuss the future of our industry. Because if our industry doesn't have a future, broadcast doesn't have a future, and C21 certainly doesn't have a future in terms of the unscripted. Michelle, totally agree. Broadcast feels like they haven't done near enough. I agree completely. You know, everybody's in this for, you know, anybody who's read my Facebook will know that I'm a dyed-in-the-wool socialist, and that I can't bear this word growth. You know, growth is about something far more spiritual than just how much money we all make. But broadcast needs to look at the growth of the industry and the people within it, not just how much money they can squeeze out of the very snazzy conferences that they put on every year. And I think that goes for a lot of the conferences. I think if MIP does move to London, it would be really good. We created a non-profit called the Entertainment Masterclass some years ago, and it basically piggybacked off the back of things like MIP, where people could go and get good advice about how to create formats, how to protect formats, and it was really good. You know, I have this wonderful alumni network now of people from the Entertainment Masterclass, but that was a non-profit, and I think, you know, C21 and Reed Meadem and all of those companies would do well at MIP this year to have side conferences about the state of the industry and allow people who can't afford to attend. Because if you've no Cafe Roma, it's because you can't afford to get into MIP. It costs an absolute fortune. That's in the south of France. Yes, broadcasted an article on the petition about the state of the industry last week. But it was behind a paywall. You know, this is the problem. You know, we're in this awful kind of catch-22, and where the people that are suffering are not being heard because in some way, shape or form, they haven't got the money to be heard, which is why we need to find a voice and to lobby like crazy to save this industry. Not moan about it, come up with ideas, to sit round and brainstorm ideas about how the industry could change and what could be done to help the people in it. And I think that's an important part. And one of the things that I kind of wanted to try and achieve by doing this. Helen Williamson, 100% agree about the prohibitive cost of going to conferences, reading broadcasts. Yeah, even reading broadcasts. I get some kind of discount that I've never been able to realise for being a member of the Royal Television Society. But if I look round at all the things that I have to pay for, Directors UK, C21, Broadcast, Royal Television Society, you know, the benefits that you're meant to get from being a member of the RTS are nowhere near offset the actual cost of being a member. What the RTS should be doing is having conferences, supporting conferences or get-togethers like the RAP or the wonderful website that Michelle and some of you organise, and supporting those in some way, shape or form, supporting the people who do this, making podcasts and getting the word out that it's not all roses. Helen Williamson, like I said, the RTS Philippa Child's talk, it cost £10, not much, but it's here to my union rep talk about the crisis. Yeah, which is just a nonsense. You know, it really is. And even, you know, yes, perhaps we should all join back to, but you know, I'm 65 this year, very proud of it, and my subscription has gone down to I think it's Directors UK, because people think that I'm probably never going to work again now that I'm 65. Apparently the government says I've got to go on till I'm a little bit older than that. This is the petition. You'll see it on LinkedIn. The petition to try and get the voice heard, that the industry is suffering and the unscripted, the non-scripted people are really suffering. So let's get the word out. Let's be ambassadors for getting the word out. Okay. Let me just continue on with my slides. I'm nearly at the end of these slides. Yes, we've talked about that. Engaging with policymakers, I do think that is important. And yes, with a bit of luck, we've got an election coming up in May. We need to, as a matter of urgency, whoever gets in, to make contact with the secretaries of state, so that they hear firsthand from the people working in the industry just how bad it is and what it means for the country. Supporting our mental health, I think that's very important, to relieve the stress, that all these financial problems, and as I say, the whole dreams of a career that come crashing down. And also looking at universities, you know, should we really be advertising media courses left and right at Farnborough, Brighton, you know, hundreds of media courses, when there just aren't the jobs? And I'm talking about production jobs. I think, you know, media analysts and people that write critiques or people that write about the media, that's one thing, but actual hands-on production, you know, is it sensible that we're training up all these people for jobs that just don't exist anymore? Working in the new normal, what strategies have we found effective for maintaining and expanding your professional network? You know, I think Talent Manager is one of them. I think LinkedIn, is that really going to help many people? I don't often see many jobs coming up on LinkedIn. I've got a couple of jobs through being on LinkedIn, but nothing like the effort that you have to put in to maintain a good network on LinkedIn. You know, and look, our industry, I've been saying this a lot recently, our industry is particularly crap at giving feedback to people. I think I've been talking to another business guru who specializes in telling people how to give feedback, and I said if she moved into the entertainment industry, she should make a fortune, because we're terrible at giving feedback. Brainstorm solutions and support. I think this isn't for tonight, but you know, what can we do? I'd be interested if any of you listening to this can email me, and I know some of you are doing a lot. We Share My Telly, Real Time Media, all the initiatives that have been set up on social media to try and help people find work. So it would be really good, and this goes some way to kind of, if you like, democratizing it, if we manage to put together a list and put our personal sides, our personal involvement aside, and come up with a list, a central list of all the websites where jobs are posted, where there's a little bit of inside information. Yeah, I've been trying to pull that together over the last couple of days, because I think that also helps democratize the whole process. And if I'm completely honest, and it's no offense, Hannah, I think she might have gone now. She said to me she had to go at 8 o'clock, but I would be much happier if we as in the people in the industry, maintain that list rather than it necessarily became unionized again. Online and branded content, usually through LinkedIn, in my experience, and they get back to you, give you feedback. Yes, that is true. Hannah, we love you. And yes, any brainstorming or ideas, you will hear them. I know you've got to run for your Bectu meeting now, but excellent. I will look forward to seeing you next week. And we'll do it on a different format so that we can all contribute a little bit more and that my voice isn't quite as sore as it is now. Okay. Just getting to the last couple of slides, which were really only for my memory. Future forecasting, looking ahead, the future of our industry, not very bright, is it? Oh, good. Hannah agrees regarding the list. It should be for everyone. Good. Pleased about that. I was gearing up to go into teaching PDs how to use Media Composer to assist the edit, making sync pulls. So I did a weekend DVD talent. It went really well, I'm pleased to say, but as soon as many of us are out of work, they don't have the money to afford the course, which is a shame. Yeah, you know, Adrian, I've looked at teaching a lot. As I say, even this year, normally I teach a whole module for the University of Creative Arts. I didn't this year because they didn't have the money to pay me, because they've lost so many international students and it just doesn't make sense. So, you know, it's the education in our industry is in a dire state of affairs. And you know, I'm not going to have a downer on people that do offer courses, but I've seen a lot of what I would call blind leading the blind courses on Facebook and social media. You know, good, solid advice is something that's by Hannah. Thank you so much for joining in. Yes, so let's, you know, and I think training is important, and it is a way for potentially us to make some extra income. But who are we training and what for? You know, that's the sadness of this, and that shows and highlights the dire state of affairs. Okay, so here we go. These two go together. Lorraine has said, happy to do any brainstorming. I was thinking about a TV branded meetup to help us speak to each other. Well, look, I'm more than happy to run this as a Zoom call so that we can all contribute a little bit more, because I can't go through this every week of yakking away. And I think that should be one of the first actionable steps. I believe I have captured everybody who was on this particular call, so I'll just invite everybody to a Zoom meeting. I don't think it's much different. It just puts Zoom on the LinkedIn event, and we can all join in and be there with our own webcam, should we choose to use our webcams. I saw a post-production teaching role at the University of Hertfordshire. It's advertised on LinkedIn. It's worth a look. Yes, of course it is. There, you know, teaching roles. There are a few. I've seen some at Hull. I think the National Film and Television School are looking for people. I think that's somewhere that will always weather the storm, because it's such a, you know, it's the Oxford and Cambridge of teaching for our industry. But again, you know, it does teach TV production roles. And one of the things that becomes very clear as you move around the world is that the non-scripted game show reality genre is something that's very specialized and something that not many people can do. It's not something that I've ever thought has taught particularly well at all at universities, and there are very few people that do it on a regular basis or come up with, you know, game shows. And I'm sure people like David Bodycombe are very happy about that. But and it does take a certain skill set for coming up, and there's a lot of misinformation about how much we do manipulate reality television and why it's called reality when there's nothing even close to reality. And I was having an argument with a friend of mine on Facebook the other night, where he was saying, "Oh, reality is all fixed and it's all blah blah blah." And he said, you know, that's why I look at sport, because anything can happen. And I pointed out to him that even Australian rules football, somebody said, right, we're going to put two big posts up on either side of a field. We're going to make this ball a sort of, you know, an oval shape. So it's difficult when it bounces, it could go anywhere. That will introduce some jeopardy into the program. There's nothing in reality that is American rules football. Yes, you could argue that it's a deep-seated primordial running around chasing after, I don't know, possums in the bush to eat them, and that's what it kind of mirrors. But so does reality TV. It takes its cues from real life events. The fact that we stick somebody on a desert island is probably the oldest novel in the world of being cast away. Certainly since the advent of kind of mass sea transport. So to have shows like Survivor, where people have to survive and they have to do challenges to eat, or even I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here in the Jungle, it is constructed. But the bottom line is people are doing stuff to eat, which we've been doing since we landed on the planet. So, you know, the idea that reality is evil and made up and influenced is just the same as changing the rules to Formula One every year to make sure the cars don't run away with each other and realizing every time Max Verstappen runs away with the race, you got it wrong. So, but my point is that we have skills, we have real skills, and we have a lot of talent and talent that is more than world class. It's probably world leading in this country, and we need to make sure that the people that are affecting our industry understand what they're losing if they don't support it, and particularly support our little bit of it. And I think also support, you know, the fact that Doctors has been canned, you know, a great piece of afternoon theatre. The fact that we don't have afternoon theatre, you know, when I started in television, I worked on wonderful afternoon soaps like The Cedar Tree, Emergency Ward 10. Yes, I am that old. Doing the boom on Emergency Ward 10 when it was live was just one of the best jobs in the world. So I think we need to look at what it is we're trying to save and how we're trying to save it. And it's not just about reality and non-scripted. I think, you know, Doctors has gone for the chop. I think, you know, other data, you know, Home and Away, if you're looking further afield, has been saved by whatever streamer it is. I can't remember now, but you know, it's industry wide. Let's have a look at these. Many jobs are being given to friends of friends without being advertised externally. Yeah, you know, I think that's, you know, kind of welcome to TV in a way. I think it has always been like that. You know, I don't know that I've ever seen an advert for a job on a job board and applied for it in those ways in television. It's either been reputational, or I've heard about something, or whatever else it's happened to be. So, but I do agree that, you know, it's got a little bit closed ranks, and people clinging on to their jobs for dear life. Andy Mallon, I agree that jobs aren't being advertised. I think a lot of this is due to the indies' first choices being available due to the volume of freelancers that are available. I think that's completely right. And also the fact that schedules are getting shorter and shorter. God, are they ever? You know, we are getting into the whole area of Southeast Asian television where, you know, some phone calls are made this week about a major show next week, and the week after you're shooting it. And I think that that's going to happen slightly. But unfortunately, the planning is longer. The schedules are shorter, but the planning of the actual shoots is longer. Anybody got any other comments? Does anybody? I'm not going to put out a questionnaire at the end of this. I'm sick of that. Every time I buy anything from Amazon, I get a questionnaire asking me what my experience was like. Or every time I go to a C21 talk, they give, not that I do nowadays, but they give you, did you enjoy this? Was it useful? Was this useful? I guess the proof will be next week when we see how many people come along. Cara, it's, yeah, talking about the regulation of hiring. There's not a lot of HR good practice in television. There never has been. It's often been phoning up on, and that's why I think feedback is so important. And again, that's an HR thing that honestly I don't think has ever been done successfully in our industry. The BBC try it, but you know, in a freelance market, everybody slaps each other on the back on the wrap of the last day, and the only reason that you know you didn't do a good job is because you're not hired for series 2. So did people find this useful? I'm sorry, it's just me yakking on and reading out your... Well, thank you to everybody that's contributed via the comments. Thank you for listening, and I will be doing this next week, but I do hope we can stay engaged long enough to give the other format of doing it as a Zoom call, because I think that would work so much better than what I managed to pull together for tonight. But for the moment, I'm going to say good night. Adrian, it was the University of Hertfordshire, post-production teaching role at the University of Hertfordshire. Thanks, Lorraine. Thanks, Cara. Thanks, Jane. Okay. Good night. Enjoy the rest of the evening.